The toy shop smelled like dust and forgotten dreams. Reith moved between the cramped aisles, his tail dragging across the worn floor as he restocked shelves with cheap plastic figures. His scales, once meant to shimmer blue and silver like his species should, looked gray under the flickering station lights. The wings folded against his back had never fully opened. There was no room for that here. Station Gamma 7 hummed with the usual traffic of traders and travelers, but few ever stepped into Basque's bargain toys. The Gralvian who owned the shop spent most days in the back office, counting credits and complaining about the decline of physical toys in an age of hollow entertainment. Reith knew better than to disturb him. He had learned that lesson with bruises when he was younger. The front door chimed. Reith glanced up from his work, expecting another browser who would leave without buying anything. Instead, a human walked in, his coveralls marked with the logo of a cargo company. Humans were uncommon this far out in the outer rim, most stuck to the core systems where their colonies thrived. The man looked around with curious eyes, taking in the shelves of outdated merchandise. Reith stayed quiet, continuing his work. Basque had strict rules about speaking to customers unless directly asked a question. "Hey there," the human said, his voice friendly. "I'm looking for a gift, something for a kid back home. Got any recommendations?" Reith straightened up, startled by the casual tone. Most customers either ignored him or treated him like part of the furniture. "We have puzzles in aisle 3, hand-carved ones from Tellus IV. They are well made." The human smiled and walked toward the indicated aisle. Reith watched him pick up one of the wooden puzzle boxes, examining the intricate patterns. These were among the few quality items in the shop, pieces Basque had acquired years ago and overpriced. "This is beautiful," the human said. "How much?" 40 credits. "Fair enough." The man brought it to the register where Reith stood. As Reith processed the transaction, the human studied him with an expression that made Reith uncomfortable. Not hostile, just thoughtful. "You work here long?" the human asked. "Since I hatched," Reith replied, keeping his voice neutral. "That's your whole life in a toy shop?" Reith did not know how to answer that. It was simply fact. He had no memory of anything else. Basque claimed to have rescued him from abandonment, raising him when no one else would. The debt for that rescue was apparently eternal. The human introduced himself as Dennis Walsh, cargo handler for the freighter Steady Hand. They were docked for repairs, would be on the station for a few days. He asked questions that seemed strange to Reith. Had he ever been off the station? Did he get paid? Did he have family? Before Reith could answer much, Basque emerged from the back office, his bulbous eyes narrowing at the sight of his worker talking to a customer. "Is there a problem?" the Gralvian demanded. "No problem," Dennis said smoothly. "Just making conversation. Your employee here was very helpful." Basque grunted. "Good." Reith back to work. "Inventory in the storage room needs sorting." Reith nodded and retreated without a word. As he disappeared into the back, he heard Dennis complete his purchase and leave. That should have been the end of it, another forgettable transaction in an endless series of identical days. But Dennis returned the next morning. Reith was opening the shop, sweeping the entrance when the human approached. "Morning," Dennis said. "Got a minute?" Reith glanced around nervously. "I am working." "I can see that. Look, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about you never leaving this station." Dennis leaned against the doorframe. "That contract you mentioned, the one Basque has with you, is it in writing?" "Yes, standard indenture agreement. Galactic approved." Dennis's jaw tightened. "Can I see it?" Reith did not understand why this stranger cared, but something in the human's tone made him retrieve the document from Basque's files. Dennis read it carefully, his expression growing darker with each paragraph. "This is exploitation," Dennis said quietly. "You know that, right?" Reith had never thought about it in those terms. It was just his life, the only life he knew. "The buyout clause here," Dennis tapped the screen. 8,000 credits terminates the contract. You'd be free. I will never earn that much. Bask pays me in food and shelter, not currency. I know, Dennis looked at him directly. What if someone else paid it? The question hung in the air like something fragile and impossible. Reith's mind could not process what the human was suggesting. Why would anyone spend that much to free a draconis they just met? It made no sense according to the logic of the universe Reith understood. Over the next 2 days, Dennis visited 3 more times. Each visit he asked more questions. He met with Bask, negotiated. Reith watched from a distance, afraid to hope, afraid to even acknowledge what might be happening. On the 3rd day, Dennis arrived with a credit chip. Bask's greedy eyes lit up as the transaction processed. 7,500 credits. The Gralvian had accepted a slightly lower offer, eager to convert his unprofitable asset into immediate cash. Get your things, Bask said to Reith with a dismissive wave. You're bought out. Reith stood frozen. His few possessions consisted of a worn blanket and a smooth stone he had found years ago in a cargo shipment. He gathered them in numb silence. Dennis waited at the entrance. You're not owned anymore, he said simply. You can come with my crew or stay here and figure out what you want, but you're free now. That's done. Reith looked back at the shop, at Bask already counting his windfall, at the dusty aisles that had been his entire world. Then he looked at the human who had just paid his ransom for reasons Reith could not comprehend. I will come with you, Reith said, his voice barely a whisper. Dennis smiled. Good, let's get you out of here. They walked together toward the docking ring, toward a ship Reith had never seen, toward a future that did not yet have shape or form. For the first time in his life, Reith felt the weight of chains he had not known he carried. The freighter's steady hand looked enormous from the outside, but inside felt surprisingly cramped. Reith followed Dennis through narrow corridors lined with pipes and conduit, past crew members who glanced at him with curiosity but no hostility. The air smelled different here, cleaner than the recycled atmosphere of the station, but carrying unfamiliar chemical traces. Dennis led him to a small cabin, barely large enough for a bunk, a storage locker, and a tiny desk. This is yours, he said. Not much, but it's private. Door locks from the inside, which means nobody comes in unless you allow it. Reith stepped inside, his tail curling around his legs in confusion. Private quarters were a concept he understood intellectually but had never experienced. At the shop, he had slept on a mat in the storage room, always accessible if Bask needed something moved during the night. I don't understand, Reith said finally. What do you expect from me? Dennis leaned against the doorframe. Expect? Nothing right now. Get settled, rest, figure out what you want to do with yourself. We're shipping cargo to 3 different systems over the next 2 months. You'll see some new places. But the debt, the 7,500 credits. There's no debt. I paid that because it needed paying, not because I want something back. Dennis must have seen the disbelief in Reith's eyes because he added, Look, I know this doesn't make sense to you yet. Just take it one day at a time. After Dennis left, Reith sat on the bunk, his claws gripping the edge of the thin mattress. The door remained open because he did not yet understand that he could close it. He placed his stone and blanket in the locker, then sat in silence, waiting for instructions that never came. Eventually, hunger drew him out. He followed the sounds and smells to a common area where several crew members gathered around a long table. Food sat in the center, various dishes that humans apparently shared during meals. Reith had never eaten with others before. His meals at the shop had been nutrient paste consumed alone. A woman with gray-streaked hair and captain's insignia waved him over. You must be Reith. I'm Anne Riley, captain of this vessel. Sit down, eat. We don't stand on ceremony here. Reith approached cautiously, taking a seat at the far end of the table. A Quillen engineer named Foster pushed a plate toward him. Try the protein stew. It's decent, and I checked the nutrition database. safe for Draconis biology. The food tasted like nothing Reith had experienced, not because it was exotic or heavily spiced, but because it was simply real food, prepared with care rather than synthesized in an automated dispenser. He ate slowly, overwhelmed by the texture and flavor. The crew talked around him, discussing repair schedules, cargo manifests, and station gossip. They included him in the conversation occasionally, asking simple questions about his preferences or whether he needed anything. Reith answered in short sentences, still waiting for the demands to begin, for the true cost of his freedom to be revealed. But days passed and no demands came. Dennis showed him how to use the cabin's door lock, the shower controls, the data terminal. Captain Riley added him to the crew roster as a provisional member, with quarters and meal privileges but no required duties until he was ready. Foster took him on a tour of the engine room, explaining the fusion drive systems with enthusiasm. "You ever work with machinery?" the Quillen asked. "Only moving boxes and cleaning equipment," Reith admitted. "Well, if you want to learn, I can teach you. Always need extra hands down here." Reith found himself drawn to the engineering spaces. The orderly complexity of the systems appealed to something in his mind that had never been engaged before. He began spending hours watching Foster work, asking questions, gradually understanding the principles that kept the ship running. One evening, Dennis found him in the engine room, studying a repair manual on a datapad Foster had lent him. "You like this stuff?" Dennis asked. "I think I do. Is that allowed?" Dennis laughed. "Allowed? Reith, you can do whatever you want. That's what freedom means." "But I should be useful. I should contribute." "If you want to help Foster, great. If you want to do something else, also great. The point is that it's your choice now." Dennis sat down on a tool crate. "Can I ask you something? What did you dream about when you were stuck in that shop?" Reith had to think about that. Dreams had seemed pointless when reality was fixed and unchangeable. "I used to watch ships dock through the station windows. I wondered what it was like to fly between stars." "You're doing that now." "Yes, but I'm inside the ship. My species evolved for flight. My wings have never been used." Dennis nodded slowly. "When we make planetfall at our next stop, there's going to be open sky, real atmosphere. You could try flying there if you want." The suggestion terrified and excited Reith in equal measure. His wings had been cramped for so long, he did not know if they would even function properly. But the thought of trying, of actually attempting what his body was designed for, made something stir in his chest. 3 weeks into the journey, Captain Riley called a crew meeting. She outlined their route, the cargo they carried, the expected profit margins. Then she looked at Reith. "We'll be at New Harvest Colony in 4 days. Agricultural world, light gravity, thick atmosphere, good flying conditions." Reith understood this was for him. The entire crew knew about his wings, about his species' nature. They had planned this stop partially to give him a chance. "Thank you," he said quietly. Foster grinned. "We're going to watch you soar, friend. It's going to be amazing." That night, alone in his cabin with the door locked by his own choice, Reith extended his wings for the first time in years. They cramped immediately, muscles weak from disuse. But he stretched them anyway, feeling the membrane pull taut, imagining wind beneath them. He was afraid, but for the first time in his life he was also hopeful. New Harvest Colony spread across rolling hills covered in genetically adapted grain crops. The settlement itself was small, just a few hundred farmers working land that would feed millions across the sector. Reith stood at the bottom of the ship's ramp, staring at the open sky with something close to terror. He had seen skis through windows before, but this was different. This stretched forever in all directions, blue and vast and utterly without boundaries. The wind touched his scales, carrying scents of growing things and earth. His wings twitched involuntarily. "Take your time," Dennis said beside him. "No pressure." But Reith felt pressure from within, a biological imperative that had been suppressed his entire life. His species was meant for this. Every instinct screamed at him to leap skyward, to test what his body could do. The fear came from not knowing if those instincts would be enough, if wings that had never truly flown could support his weight. Foster and two other crew members had come along to watch. They walked with Reith to an open field away from the settlement, giving him space. Captain Riley had negotiated permission from the colony administrator for Reith to use the land. The humans seemed to understand the significance of this moment better than Reith himself did. "Whenever you're ready," Foster said encouragingly. Reith extended his wings fully. The muscles ached and protested, but the membrane caught the wind immediately. The sensation was startling. His wings wanted to lift him. They were designed for exactly this purpose, even if he had never used them before. He ran forward, building speed across the field. His legs pumped harder, wings beginning to beat in rhythm he did not consciously control. For a moment he was simply running. Then his feet left the ground. 3 seconds. That was how long the first flight lasted. 3 seconds of awkward, uncoordinated airborne motion before his inexperienced wings failed to maintain the proper angle and he crashed into the grain. He landed hard, rolling through the crops and coming to rest on his back, staring up at the sky. He had flown, briefly, clumsily, but he had flown. Dennis jogged over, concern on his face. "You okay?" Reith started laughing. He did not know where the sound came from, but it erupted from his chest in waves of relief and joy. "I flew. I actually flew." "You did, and you're going to do it again, right?" Reith got to his feet, ignoring the soreness in his wings and legs. He walked back to his starting position. This time he understood a bit more about the motion, about the angle his wings needed to catch the air. He ran again, beat his wings harder, and stayed airborne for nearly 10 seconds before losing control and tumbling into another ungraceful landing. He tried again, and again. Each attempt lasted a bit longer, felt a bit more natural. His body was remembering something it had never been taught, genetic memory awakening in muscles that finally had the chance to fulfill their purpose. By the time the colony's sun began to set, he was managing flights of almost 30 seconds, banking in shallow turns before exhaustion forced him down. The crew cheered each attempt, offering advice and encouragement. Foster recorded some of the flights on his datapad. "Your daughter is going to love seeing this," he said to Dennis. Reith collapsed in the grass eventually, wings spread wide, breathing hard but feeling more alive than he could remember. Dennis sat down beside him. "How do you feel?" "Sore, tired, happy." Reith looked at the human who had changed his life. "Why did you do this? Really? You could have walked past that shop. You could have bought your gift and never thought about me again." Dennis was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "I had a brother once, younger than me, got into debt with some bad people when he was barely an adult. They had him working in a factory on Europa, same kind of contract you had, legal but wrong. By the time I saved enough to buy him out, he'd been there 5 years. He was different after that, broken in ways that never fully healed." "Did he recover?" "Partially. He got therapy, found work he enjoyed, built a life. But those years in that factory took something from him that he never got back." Dennis met Reith's eyes. "When I saw you in that shop, saw how Basque treated you, I thought about my brother. I had the credits this time. I could do something right then, not years too late, so I did." Reith understood then. This was not about him specifically. It was about Dennis trying to fix something that had happened to someone he loved, trying to prevent the same damage from happening to someone else. That did not make the gesture less meaningful. If anything, it made it more so. "Thank you," Reith said, "for seeing me." They stayed in the field until darkness fell and the colony's lights began to glow in the distance. Reith's wings ached, but it was a good ache, the kind that came from use rather than neglect. He folded them carefully, already planning to practice more tomorrow before the ship departed. On the walk back to the steady hand, Foster showed Reith the recordings he had made. Seeing himself in flight, even the clumsy early attempts made something swell in Reith's chest. He was a Draconis. He could fly. That simple truth felt revolutionary. That night in his cabin, Reith accessed the ship's communication system. Dennis had shown him how to send messages. He composed one carefully, choosing words that felt inadequate but necessary. He sent it to the only address he knew, the shop on Station Gamma 7. The message was simple. I flew today, I am well. I hope you find whatever you are searching for. He did not expect a response from Basque. That was not the point. The message was for himself, a way of closing one chapter and acknowledging that a new one had begun. He slept deeply that night, dreaming of open skies and unlimited horizons. 3 months of working on the steady hand taught Reith more than he had learned in his entire previous life. Foster trained him in basic engineering, showing him how to repair hull seals, calibrate sensor arrays, and maintain the life support systems. Captain Riley gave him actual responsibilities, trusting him with inventory management and cargo loading optimization. His first real paycheck felt surreal, credits that belonged to him with no conditions attached. But it was during a quiet night shift that everything changed. Reith was monitoring communications while the rest of the crew slept, a simple task that mainly involved watching automated systems. Then a signal came through on a frequency he recognized. Draconis language, encoded in an old dialect that most modern systems would not even flag as important. The message was fragmented, clearly sent in secret. Someone was asking for help from Station Kesler 9, a mining outpost in a contested sector. Reith enhanced the signal, his hands moving quickly across the controls Foster had taught him to use. The voice was female, young, frightened. She spoke of conditions similar to what he had endured, workers held in contracts they could not escape, dangerous mining work without proper safety equipment, threats against anyone who complained. Reith recorded the message and brought it to Captain Riley the next morning. She listened carefully, her expression growing troubled. Kesler 9 is outside our normal routes. It's in a gray zone legally, which means fewer regulations, probably why they operate the way they do. Can we help them? Reith asked. Help how? We're a cargo freighter, not a rescue ship. We don't have the resources or authority to shut down operations. Dennis, who had been listening nearby, spoke up. We could at least investigate, verify the claims. If they're holding workers illegally, that information gets reported to the right authorities. Riley sighed. Investigation means detour. Detour means fuel costs and schedule delays. And if the operation is legal under local governance, which it probably is, we'll have wasted time and credits for nothing. It won't be for nothing, Reith said quietly. Those workers will know someone cared enough to check. The captain studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Dennis, then at Foster, who had joined them. Crew vote. This affects everyone. If we do this, we do it together. The vote was unanimous. Even the Hessic navigator, who rarely spoke on matters outside his duties, agreed they should investigate. Riley altered their course, adding 2 days to their journey. The decision felt significant to Reith, evidence that humans often chose principle over profit, a concept Basque would have found incomprehensible. Station Kesler 9 loomed in the viewscreen 3 days later, a ugly industrial structure built into a large asteroid. Ships came and went carrying ore, but the station itself looked poorly maintained. Dennis and Reith prepared to go aboard, posing as potential clients interested in purchasing processed minerals. Let me do most of the talking, Dennis instructed. You observe, notice things. Your eyes are better than mine anyway. They docked and made their way through the station's grimy corridors. A Vroccan administrator named Jessic met them in an office that smelled of chemicals and stale air. He was eager to discuss business, showing them production reports and pricing structures. Dennis asked smart questions about labor costs and efficiency while Reith watched through the window. In the processing center below, Reith could see them. 12 Draconis workers moving between machines, their scales dull from poor nutrition and harsh conditions. They worked without rest, without proper protective gear against the toxic dust that filled the air. One stumbled and was immediately yelled at by a supervisor. Reith recognized the fear in their posture. He had moved the same way once. "Your workers look tired," Dennis observed casually. Jessic waved dismissively. "Their contract labor, fed and housed, they perform adequately." "Can we speak with them, get a sense of their expertise?" "That won't be necessary. I assure you our operation meets all local standards." Which meant nothing, Reith knew. Local standards in contested zones were often non-existent. He caught Dennis's eye and gave a slight nod. They had enough to report, but Reith wanted more. He wanted to talk to those workers directly. They finished their meeting and left the office, but Reith memorized the station layout. That night, he returned alone using skills Foster had taught him about accessing maintenance tunnels. He found the workers' quarters, a cramped dormitory with barely enough bunks. A female Draconis spotted him first. Her eyes widened in recognition of his species, then narrowed in suspicion. "Who are you?" "My name is Reith. I received a distress call. Someone here asked for help." She looked around nervously. "That was Sierra, but you shouldn't be here. If Jessic finds out we contacted anyone outside, he'll punish all of us." "I just need to know the truth. Are you being held against your will?" An older male stepped forward. "We have contracts, legal ones, but they're designed so we can never pay them off. We work, we get food and shelter, but the debts only grow. Anyone who refuses gets locked in isolation. One worker tried to escape last year. They found him in the recycling system, called it an accident." Reith felt rage building in his chest. "I was like you once. Someone bought my freedom. A human showed me there was another way." "Humans don't help Draconis," the female said bitterly. "They profit from us like everyone else." "Some do, but not all." Reith pulled out his datapad, showing them recordings of his time on the steady hand, proof of his claims. "My captain is preparing a report for the Galactic Authority, but I need evidence from you. Medical scans, testimony, anything that proves abuse." The workers exchanged glances. Sierra, a young female with scarred wings, stepped forward. "I'll help. If there's even a small chance this works, I'll help." Others agreed, though some remained skeptical. Reith spent 2 hours gathering information, recording testimony, documenting their injuries. He left before dawn, returning to the steady hand with enough evidence to support formal charges. Captain Riley reviewed everything he had collected. "This is damning, but Jessic will fight back hard. He has money and local connections. Are you sure you want to push this?" Reith thought about the workers still trapped in those quarters. He thought about who he had been 3 months ago. "I'm sure." Captain Riley transmitted the evidence to the Galactic Authority Enforcement Division, marking it urgent and requesting immediate inspection. The response came back within hours. An inspector would arrive at Kesler 9 in 5 standard days. 5 days that felt like an eternity to Reith, knowing what those workers were enduring. But Jessic was not stupid. Station security had detected Reith's unauthorized access to the workers' quarters. Within a day, the Vrakan administrator sent a formal complaint to the steady hand, accusing them of trespassing and industrial espionage. He demanded they leave the sector immediately or face legal action. "He's trying to get rid of us before the inspector arrives," Foster said during the emergency crew meeting. Dennis nodded. "If we leave, those workers are vulnerable. Jessic could move them, hide evidence, make our report look false." Captain Riley paced the common room. "If we stay, he could have us arrested on legitimate charges. Reith did technically trespass. We'd be tied up in local courts while Jessic covers his tracks." "So what do?" asked the Hessic navigator. Reith had been thinking about this problem since the complaint arrived. "I should go back to the station, officially this time," Request employment. Everyone stared at him. Absolutely not, Dennis said immediately. You just escaped that life. I'm not letting you walk back into it. Not permanently, just long enough to document current conditions for the inspector. If I'm inside as a worker, Jessic can't claim we fabricated evidence from outside. Reith kept his voice steady despite the fear churning in his stomach. Besides, the other workers trust me now. I can help organize them, make sure they're ready to testify when the inspector arrives. Captain Riley looked skeptical. You'd be completely vulnerable in there. If Jessic suspects what you're doing, there's no guarantee of your safety. I know, but those 12 Draconis have no one else willing to take that risk. The crew debated for hours. Dennis argued most strongly against the plan, but Reith remained firm. Finally, Captain Riley made the decision. We'll allow it, but with conditions. Foster will set you up with a hidden transmitter. You signal us if anything goes wrong, we come get you immediately, legal consequences be damned. Reith returned to Kesler 9 the next day, presenting himself as an experienced worker seeking employment. Jessic was suspicious, but greedy. Another worker meant more productivity and profit. He offered the same exploitative contract Reith had escaped from, and Reith signed it without hesitation. The other workers were shocked when he arrived at the dormitory that evening. Sierra approached him immediately. You came back. I didn't think you would. I told you I would help. I meant it. Over the next 3 days, Reith worked alongside them in the processing center. The conditions were worse than he had imagined. The mining equipment was old and dangerous, maintained poorly to save costs. The air filters barely functioned, filling their lungs with toxic dust. They worked 12-hour shifts with minimal breaks, fed nutrition paste that barely met their biological needs. But Reith also observed something else. Not all the humans working at the station supported Jessic's operation. Some of the maintenance contractors looked uncomfortable with how the Draconis workers were treated. A few even offered small kindnesses when supervisors were not watching, extra water rations or brief rest periods. Reith spoke quietly with these humans during shift changes. One named Paulson admitted he had complained to Jessic about safety violations, but was told to mind his business or lose his contract. Another woman named Chen said she had documented injuries in her medical logs, but her reports were routinely deleted. Why do you stay if you know it's wrong? Reith asked Chen. Same reason those Draconis workers stay. Money and contracts. I'm not brave enough to risk my livelihood. She looked ashamed. But if someone official came asking questions, I'd tell them everything. Reith filed that information away. The inspector would need witnesses beyond the Draconis workers, people Jessic could not simply dismiss as disgruntled labor. On the 4th day, something went wrong. One of the younger Draconis workers, exhausted from double shifts, made a mistake operating a sorting mechanism. The machine jammed, halting production. Jessic arrived in a fury, screaming at the young worker and threatening isolation punishment. Reith stepped forward without thinking. It was my fault, I distracted him. Jessic turned his anger on Reith. I should have known better than to hire someone so quickly. You're trouble. I'm just a worker trying to do my job. No, you're a spy. You're the one who trespassed before, collecting information for that freighter captain. Jessic's eyes were sharp with realization. Security told me about a Draconis matching your description. The situation escalated rapidly. Jessic ordered his security team to detain Reith and investigate. The other workers began to protest, their frustration finally boiling over. Sierra stood beside Reith, her wings spread in defiance. He's right to expose you. We're all right to want freedom. Other Draconis joined her, forming a loose group around Reith. The humans in the processing center stopped working, watching tensely. Some of Jessic's own security looked uncertain, unwilling to use force against a dozen workers making legitimate complaints. Jessic realized he was losing control. He activated the station-wide alert system. All workers return to quarters immediately. Anyone who refuses faces termination of contract and ejection from the station. It was a bluff. Ejecting workers into space would be murder, illegal even in contested zones. But the threat worked on some. A few workers began to move toward the dormitory. Others held their ground, looking to Reith for guidance he did not know how to provide. Reith activated the hidden transmitter Foster had given him, sending the emergency signal to the steady hand. Then he addressed Jessic directly. "The Galactic Authority Inspector arrives tomorrow. You can threaten us, but the truth is already documented. It's over." "Nothing is over until I say it's over." Jessic gestured to his security. "Lock them all in the dormitory. No food until they agree to resume work and sign statements denying any abuse." As security began herding workers toward the dormitory, Reith caught Sierra's eye. She nodded slightly. They had done what they could. Now they had to trust that Dennis and the others would follow through on their promise to help. The dormitory felt smaller with all 12 workers locked inside, plus Reith. Jessic had deactivated the environmental controls to minimum settings, making the air thin and uncomfortable. It was a calculated cruelty, meant to break their resistance without leaving obvious evidence of torture. Sierra sat beside Reith against the wall. "Do you think your captain will really come?" "Yes," Dennis promised. Reith had absolute faith in that, even if he could not fully explain why. The human had proven himself trustworthy in ways Reith was still learning to understand. Hours passed. Some workers slept fitfully. Others talked quietly about what might happen when the inspector arrived, if they would face retaliation, if this act of defiance would cost them everything. Reith listened, offering what reassurance he could while fighting his own doubts. Then the entire station shuddered. Alarms blared through the corridors. The workers jolted awake, confusion and fear spreading through the dormitory. Through the small window, Reith could see the steady hand maneuvering into an aggressive docking position, magnetic clamps forcing connection despite station controls' attempts to refuse access. The dormitory door exploded inward. Dennis stood there with Foster and 3 other human crew members carrying emergency breaching equipment. "Everyone out now. We're ending this." Jessic's voice came over the station intercom, panicked and furious. "You're committing piracy. I'll have you arrested. The Galactic Authority will side with me." Captain Riley's voice responded, broadcast across all frequencies. "The Galactic Authority Inspector is 3 hours away, not tomorrow as scheduled." She responded to our emergency transmission about workers being held hostage. "I've also forwarded documentation to every news service in the sector. What happens next is up to you, Jessic." The Vrochan administrator had seconds to make a choice: fight and guarantee criminal charges, or surrender and hope for leniency. His voice came back bitter and defeated. "Stand down, security. Let them take the workers." But the human contractors Reith had spoken with were already acting. Paulson arrived at the dormitory with medical supplies. Chen brought food and water. Others helped the Draconis workers move toward the steady hand, providing support and apologizing for not acting sooner. "You could have helped us before," Sierra said to Chen, accusation in her voice. "You're right, we should have. I'm sorry." Chen met her eyes. "For what it's worth, I'm testifying against Jessic. Several of us are. This stops now." The Draconis workers boarded the steady hand, cramming into every available space. The ship was not designed for 25 occupants, but no one complained. Reith helped them settle, distributing blankets and explaining the basics of the ship's systems. The Galactic Authority Inspector arrived exactly on schedule, her enforcement frigate bristling with weapons. She spent 6 hours on Kesler 9, interviewing workers, examining records, and building a case. Jessic tried to argue that everything was legal under local regulations, but the inspector had jurisdiction that superseded local law when workers' rights violations were this severe. The contracts were declared void. Jessic faced criminal charges for endangerment, fraud, and labor trafficking. His operation was shut down pending investigation. The Draconis workers were legally free, but now faced a new problem. They had nowhere to go and no resources to support themselves. Captain Riley gathered everyone in the cargo bay. "We can't keep you all aboard long-term, but we can help you find placements, real jobs with fair wages and protections." She had already been working her contacts. A farming collective on Verdant 3 needed workers willing to learn agricultural skills, offering housing and training. A shipyard at Anchor Point Station was hiring for technical apprenticeships. A university on Helios Prime had xenobiology research positions and would sponsor education for qualified candidates. Over the next 2 weeks, the Steady Hand became a transport vessel, delivering each Draconis worker to their chosen new beginning. Reith watched them leave one by one, seeing in their eyes the same mixture of fear and hope he had felt 3 months earlier. Sierra chose to stay with the crew, accepting a position as junior engineering assistant under Foster's supervision. "I want to learn what you learned," she told Reith. "I want to help others the way you helped us." When the last worker had been safely delivered to their new life, Captain Riley called a meeting. "That detour cost us significant time and credits. We missed contracted deliveries. Our reputation with some clients is damaged." She paused, letting the weight settle. "But we also saved 13 lives and exposed a criminal operation. I need to know if this crew is willing to do this kind of thing again if the opportunity arises." Every hand went up without hesitation. Reith stood in the observation deck later that night, watching stars stream past. Dennis joined him, carrying 2 containers of hot tea, a human custom Reith had grown to enjoy. "You did something incredible," Dennis said. "You took what I gave you and multiplied it 13 times over." "I just did what you taught me, see suffering and choose to act." "It's more than that. You risked going back into the exact situation you escaped from. That takes courage I'm not sure I have." Reith considered this. "You spent 7,000 credits on a stranger for no reason except that it was right. That's a different kind of courage." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the universe roll by. Reith thought about the workers now beginning their new lives, about Sierra learning engineering 3 decks below, about the fact that his actions had created ripples spreading outward in ways he could not fully track. His datapad chimed, a message from one of the workers now at the farming collective. The text was simple: "Thank you for showing us that humans can change fate." Reith showed it to Dennis, who smiled. "You changed your own fate too, remember that." "I remember, and I'll keep changing it." Reith spread his wings slightly, feeling the strength that had developed from months of practice and proper nutrition. There are more stations like Kesler 9, more workers trapped in situations they can't escape alone. "Then I guess we have more work to do." Reith looked at his friend, at the human who had bought his freedom and taught him what freedom actually meant. Together. The Steady Hand continued its journey through the vast darkness, carrying a crew bound not by contracts or obligation, but by the simple choice to care when they did not have to. And in the cargo hold, tucked among legitimate freight, sat a small wooden puzzle box, a gift Dennis had once bought from a failing toy shop, a reminder that sometimes the smallest actions create the largest changes.